He is much sought after as a public speaker, a filmmaker. I know him as a friend, a conservative and dedicated American, a man who understands the greatness of our phenomenal land and the promise it offers to all who seek out its rewards and riches. A man who has been there, a man who has done that. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dinesh D'Souza.
Thank you. I got this one. Jerry, thank you very much for that fantastic and generous introduction. I'm very thankful to the Gilhausens for making this possible and for inviting me to come back, having been a bit of a no-show last year. I can't tell you how consoling and exciting it was for me to be addressing you last year from the dungeon, so to speak. But it's much better to be here in Montana on a beautiful day, and what a beautiful patriotic setting this is. And I'm particularly happy to be out of confinement and to be free. It was at the end of May that I finished my 8 months in captivity. I was out at 4 in the morning, so I went up to the guard and I said to him, "It's time to say goodbye." I gave him my rolled up sheets and pillowcase, and I emptied out my little locker. I walked out into the street, and there were a couple of reporters out there, and one of them said, "Well, Dinesh, how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, I feel a bit like Winston Churchill felt during the Boer War. He said, 'It is always exhilarating to be shot at without result.'" So I feel terrific. I realize that we as a country are in a big fight, and we are in a big fight with people who play very rough. And what I want to do tonight is to give a little bit of a different kind of take on American politics, a take that actually has been informed by my experience of 8 months, you may say, hanging out with the hoodlums. Now, most of you seem to be very familiar with the situation, but there may be some of you who aren't. So I should tell you a little bit about my crime and my offense. My offense consisted of giving $20,000 above the campaign finance limit. The campaign finance limit is $10,000 to a college friend of mine named Wendy Long, who was running in 2012 for the U.S. Senate in New York. The judge in my trial said to me, "Dinesh, why did you do this? Why did you exceed the campaign finance limit?" And I said to him, "Your Honor, I left India at the age of 17 to come to America as an exchange student. The experience of an immigrant is very peculiar. In a sense, it's kind of like walking a tightrope between two buildings. The first building is, of course, India, and the second is America. And I said that when you begin this journey, at some point you've left the first building. You don't feel like you belong there anymore, but you actually haven't arrived at the second building yet. You're in that no man's land where you don't seem to belong to any place, and you've left your whole world behind." I said, "Your Honor, at this dizzying stage of life, I found myself on the Dartmouth campus. I befriended a group of young people who became kind of like a surrogate family to me. One of them was Wendy Long. So fast forward 20 years later, when she was running for office, I felt a powerful desire as a friend to try to help her. So that's why I did what I did. The judge was completely unimpressed and sentenced me not only to the confinement center 8 months, but to mandatory psychological counseling, apparently to re-educate me a little bit and bring me to an appropriate penance, perhaps not just for my crimes, but also for my beliefs. In other words, he found me to be rather shameless and unrepentant. And now look, I agree that in this situation I did exceed the campaign's finance limit. I did actually break the law. But justice is not just a matter of whether you broke the law. Justice is also a matter of proportioning the penalty to the offense. Justice is also a matter of making sure that other people who did similar offenses get similar punishments. Right about the time my case was making its way, there was another guy, as it turns out an Asian Indian guy named Chatwal. We Asian Indians appear to specialize in campaign finance violations. But in any event, this guy, a Democrat, gave $180,000 in straw donations to Hillary Clinton and a whole slew of Democratic candidates. He was also convicted of witness tampering, and he was openly corrupt. He said we have to buy the politicians because there's no other way that they'll do what we say. So while my case was a case of helping a friend, here you have a case which actually fits why the campaign finance laws were passed. And yet this guy got no prison, no confinement. He got a mild community service sentence, much lighter than mine, and he got 3 years of probation versus me getting 5. The point I want to make here is that we're dealing with selective justice. And this is important because we're living at a time when justice is the trump card of the Democratic Party. Justice is the highest virtue that the progressives always appeal to. Now, when they appeal to justice, usually with the adjective social justice, we as Republicans, we as conservatives, usually play a rival card. Our card is called liberty or freedom. But it is important to realize that the freedom card doesn't trump the justice card. In fact, if you go back to the ancient philosophers, justice is the primary virtue of any society. If right now in this room we were to see some example of gross injustice, we would be horrified. We'd be outraged. If you see a deprivation of freedom, you're not automatically outraged. You have to ask why. Because people are deprived of freedom all the time. The question is whether the deprivation is reasonable. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that one of the reasons I think we have a difficult time in politics is that we play our card, the king, which is freedom, and then they trump it by playing the ace, which is justice. We need a politics that does not concede the issue of justice to the other side. Now, I found myself at the gates of this confinement center, actually in the beginning feeling pretty good about myself, because as I had told Megyn Kelly on the Fox News channel, I had sort of beaten the prison thing and defeated the Obama administration's effort to get me a 10 to 16 month federal prison sentence. And instead I got this confinement center thing, which I knew very little about, but I figured it had to be a lot better. But when I showed up at the confinement center, the guard, the very first day, said to me, he goes, "Oh no, you would have been much better off to be in prison." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "Because it's white-collar prison. Don't you know who's in white-collar prison?" He goes, "You're going to meet dentists. You're going to meet mayors. You're going to meet business executives, doctors who defrauded Medicare. Basically a very interesting crop of people." And I go, "Well, what about in here?" He goes, whole different class. And what he really meant was that in the confinement center, which is a kind of transition point for criminals who have served their sentence in prison, but the criminals are the whole gamut. So we had guys who were drug smugglers, people who were coyotes, people from the Mexican mafia, people who were guilty of murder, gangs, the whole range of criminal activity. As long as you did your sentence, you typically serve 30 to 90 days in the confinement center, and then you'll be happy to know you're out of the street. So this was the crowd that I got to hang with for the next 8 months. And initially, I was actually I noticed that there was all kinds of gang activity going on. And the gangs were pretty complex. I mean, there were multiple gangs, and even the Hispanics, who were the majority in the confinement center, broke up into two major categories. Apparently, the American Hispanics were called Southsiders, and they were in one kind of gang. And then the Mexicans were in their own group. So the whole thing was rather Byzantine, and I thought to myself, I better not talk to this guy because I might offend that guy. I better stay to myself. I did consider forming an Asian Indian gang, but I realized I would be the sole member. I'd have to hold all the offices myself. So for about a month or so, I kind of kept to myself. But then I sort of had an epiphany. I realized, wait a minute, I'm a conservative, and I happen to be in a place where conservatives rarely go. I mean, here I am in a confinement center close to the Mexican border. I sleep on a bunk bed with 120 other fellow criminals. I said, I'm not going to run into George Willen here or Charles Krauthammer. I actually am in a place where I might be able to learn something. I'm sort of like an anthropologist who has been tossed into a strange land.
On the iris?
So I began to then talk to people, and I began to excavate, get people to show me their case files and tell me their stories so I could actually learn about something I otherwise would never learn about, which I'm going to call the ideology of the criminal underclass. Now, as a fan of the movie The Shawshank Redemption, I was under the impression that most criminals, when confronted, insistently profess their complete innocence. But what I found was interesting about these guys in the confinement center was that if you talk to them, they did not in fact claim to be innocent. They actually had a more nuanced view of their situation. Their view was, yes, we did it. Yes, we are criminals, but we have to label ourselves the stupid criminals. After all, we're here. We're the ones who got caught. Second, while we admit that we're criminals, we don't think that we are the big fry. We are the kind of small fry. The big criminals are at large. The big criminals are actually so powerful that the system will never go after them because they are actually running it. And this view of the criminal underclass startled me. It startled me first because most of my life I have been, you might say, in the very safe precincts of American life. Dartmouth College, the White House, the American Enterprise Institute, the Hoover Institute. I've lived in the world of think tanks. And I think of American politics as a clash of ideas. A clash of ideas between the people who believe in liberty and the people who believe in justice. The people who believe in equality of opportunity and the people who believe in equality of result. And so we have this great, you may say, intellectual arm wrestling match between Republicans and Democrats. And I want to say that from the point of view of the criminal underclass, this whole argument, this whole way of thinking and talking about American politics is, if you'll pardon my expression, total and complete bullshit. What I'm trying to say is that from their point of view, life is lived at the elemental level. And in fact, for many months, I would lie in my bunk bed and I would hear people talk, and I realized that all they talked about were the following topics. food, money, sex, and sleep. And that's pretty much it. No other topics were brought up. These are people who live at the most elemental level, and from their point of view, real life and real politics is fought at the level of primal human impulses. In other words, people are motivated by the most basic human passions of greed, lust, hate, fear, envy, revenge. And that's what really drives politics. But people don't like to say that, and so they manufacture a squid-like cloud of rhetoric to fool people into thinking that they're motivated by other things. And the job of clarity is to remove the veil and look at politics as it really is. In other words, what I was hearing from these criminals isn't just the criminal point of view, it's actually the point of view that is argued by the philosopher Machiavelli. So Machiavelli faulted the ancient philosophers. He goes, all the ancients, from Plato to Aristotle, he says they focus on, quote, imaginary republics and principalities which have in reality never been known to exist. And so what Machiavelli means is that for centuries, people have only talked about the world as it ought to be. Things ought to be this way, things ought to be that way. And Machiavelli's point of view is that, in fact, we should look at the world as it really is. And I would argue that this is something that would be very helpful in thinking about politics today. When we look at our situation, we are facing, perhaps in America, a different situation than we have ever faced before. We're facing a Democratic Party and a Democratic opposition that's different than Democrats of the past. If we actually continue in the same way, we are almost guaranteed to keep losing. And so what I want to do is try to give a little fresh look at who are these people, what motivates them, and how can we actually defeat them. Not by issuing broad calls for this or that, or asking other people to do things that they are not likely to do, but to actually see what we here in this room can do. Because there's actually a great deal of concentrated power in this room tonight. And a lot that can be done that is in fact not being done. Now, when you look at the way that liberals talk about conservatives or Democrats talk about Republicans, it's really easy to see that they have actually taken the perspective of the criminal underclass. They always attack our motives. So if you ask someone on the left what motivates Republicans, you'll get an answer that sounds something like this. Republicans are motivated by greed, acquisitiveness, materialism, racism, hatred of women, homophobia, a warmongering impulse, hypocrisy. So from their point of view, we are really bad guys. And that explains why we act the way we do. Now, if you ask Republicans what motivates Democrats, if you were to ask any of the Republican candidates what they think of President Obama, they would say something like this. President Obama is a nice man. He's well motivated. He's trying to do what's right for America, but his policies just don't work. In other words, he's in the title of a book that came out a couple of years ago. He's an amateur. And so, for 7 years, we've been trying to educate Obama. We've been trying to explain to him, oh, Obama, we need to tell you that Vladimir Putin used to be a KGB officer. Oh, Obama, we need to convince you that when the mullahs say they want a nuclear bomb, they probably do. Oh, Obama, when you block oil drilling and they make confiscatory taxes and burdensome regulations, that's going to restrict the economy and it's going to reduce jobs. And on we go. And what's really interesting is that we've been at this now for 2 presidential terms, and we seem to have made no headway. We never make headway with anyone on the left. They never seem to go, gee, you're right. They're ineducable. All our educational efforts have come to naught. Why is that? Maybe because that's not actually the problem. Maybe the problem is not that they don't know. Here's Obama. He's one of the best informed people in the world. He has access to information that we in this room cannot even dream of getting. He knows. He's actually up to something else. So what is that? Well, in my view, what we are really seeing in America is a fight to the finish, you might say, a deadly war that is going on under the surface between two extremely powerful groups of people. On the one hand, you have the wealth creators, the entrepreneurs, the people who have figured out how to make stuff. This is the wealth creating class. On the other side, you have a no less powerful group. And this is, I would call it, the knowledge class. It's a class that are made up of journalists and academicians and community organizers and political figures. These are all people who don't make things. They actually do make something. What they make is words. And there are these two classes of people. They detest each other. And they are fighting for control of what? Control of the levers of wealth and power in American society. Now, historically, the knowledge class, the people, if you will, of words, have always dominated societies. In India, they were the Brahmins, the priests, and the oracles. In Europe, they were the aristocrats and the monarchs. And later there were the intellectuals and the people, the courtiers at the French court who flattered the king. And these were the people who basically told society what to do. And the merchants were low men on the totem pole. But America was a society created to empower the entrepreneur, to bring the entrepreneur to center stage. And entrepreneurs began to transform America and bring about this great lifting of prosperity that made America far and away the richest country in the world, that provided an abundance to the ordinary guy almost unimaginable, not just in Africa or in Asia, but also in Europe. But the other class, the knowledge class that was pushed to the side, has never gone away. It remains extremely powerful. Now, what is it that entrepreneurs do? What entrepreneurs do is they don't just supply what people want. They do that. So people want food, and so entrepreneurs supply food. But the most successful entrepreneurs not only respond to consumer wants, but they're able to envision wants even before people have them. And so if you think of somebody like Steve Jobs, it wasn't that a lot of people wrote him letters saying we need to have an iPhone. Steve Jobs conceived of the iPhone and built it and provided it before we knew we couldn't live without it. That is entrepreneurship on the supply side. Supply precedes demand. Now, let's contrast Steve Jobs on the one hand as a prototypical entrepreneur with Obama. Now, Obama could not begin to build an iPhone. That guy can't even put up a website. From the point of view of the entrepreneurial virtues, the capitalist virtues, he's a complete loser. But this does not mean that Obama is untalented. Obama is talented. He's talented at something else. He's not, in my view, so much a community organizer. He's a resentment organizer. And what I mean by that is that Obama knows effectively how to draw on the lowest of human motives: envy, resentment, hatred, even self-hatred, and give that a political outlet, and equally impressive, to shroud it with virtue. What I mean by this is that we are seeing huge changes in our economy. The changes in our economy are not new, but maybe the pace of them has accelerated. So there are, for example, if you look at the great convulsions of the American economy in the past 25 years, we have seen three factors operating simultaneously. First, technology. Second, immigration. And third, globalization. All of those three things have the same effect. They basically mean that whole classes of industry or employment are made obsolete because that product can now be made better or cheaper somewhere else or in some other way. Now, this is going to mean that whole classes of people are going to be out of work, and they're going to be frustrated, and they're going to ask, where's my American dream? Now notice that Obama and the Democrats make no effort not only to do anything about these three factors, but even to identify them as a source of the problem. Instead, Obama is about something totally different. He doesn't want to actually do anything about immigration. He can't do anything about technology. He hasn't taken any steps to modify globalization. He's just acquiescing in it. So what is it that he does do? While leaving the sources of the problems untouched, he actually goes to the people who feel defeated, who feel lost and useless, and who feel a certain understandable frustration, envy, and resentment against other people who are more successful. And Obama says to these frustrated people, listen, you are not a loser. You are not actually envious. You are not even resentful. You are righteously indignant because see those successful people over there? They have been stealing from you. They are in possession of your stuff. They are holding, you might say, stolen goods. And the good news for you is that you have me. By voting for me, you're going to empower me to go take their stuff, and then I'll give some of it to you. So this, it seems to me, is actually the transaction that is driving democratic politics. It is finding a powerful outlet for the human emotions of envy, resentment, and hatred, and it's giving them a political target, and the political target is us. Us. The progressives, by the way, are not trying to tax us. They are not trying to annoy us. They're not just trying to increase their share of the federal government. They are trying to take the entire wealth of America and put it at their command. They want to take over every major industry. They want to have leverage and control over your private wealth. I'm not talking about taxing your income. I'm talking about actually confiscating your wealth. Not only do they want to do this, to a considerable degree they already have. They have essentially appropriated the healthcare industry. Starting with all the so-called reforms following the crash of 2008, they now powerfully control the industries of banking and finance and are able through regulation to control all kinds of private transactions that are going on in those industries. What's left? Education? Right in their targets next. So what we're facing here is an attempt ultimately to control the wealth of America. Now, in this situation, what do we as Republicans do? It seems to me that the reason our situation has become quite dire is that over the past 25 years, we have allowed the other side not always to win in politics. In politics, we've actually been able to win about as good as they have. They have the presidency, we have the Congress. But notice how the presidency seems to be working for them and holding the Congress doesn't seem to be working for us. Why is that? Well, people say, well, that's because we've got these idiots, John Boehner and McConnell. Let's get rid of those guys. But the question to ask is, why are our leaders, not just Boehner or McConnell, why are all of them behaving so strangely? Is it simply that they lack conviction? Do they actually secretly want Obama to succeed? No. It seems to me the reason that our leaders behave the way they do is due to fear. Fear of what? Fear of the media. Boehner knows, McConnell knows that if they do what we want, they will be destroyed in the media. They will be attacked relentlessly and unstoppingly, and they will be surrounded with such a bad odor that ultimately their own side will sink them. So this terror runs through our leaders who recognize that the power of the media is the power to humiliate, to disgrace, and to destroy. We don't have that power. We can't humiliate and destroy people on the other side. So what I'm getting at is, and the media is only one thing, so we think of politics as a battlefield. But for the left, politics is one corner of the battlefield. Everywhere I go, people go, well, Dinesh, tell me, I have one question for you. Who are you supporting for president? Which Republican contender do you think is going to pull this off? And I'm thinking to myself, and I have thoughts about that subject, that is so unimportant an issue right now compared to recognizing, stepping back and seeing what is the actual battlefield. And what I mean is that while we're in a big huddle, we got to take the presidency, and we do, but the left says, how do we identify, invade, occupy, and control all the powerful institutions of our culture? So what are those? The media, Hollywood, Broadway, the whole comedy industry, higher education, all the universities and colleges, elementary and secondary education. So here we are, Republicans, fighting politically, and here's the left conducting a long march through all these cultural institutions, each of which is a huge megaphone into the culture. Take education. Conservatives are lucky to send me or Michelle Malkin or Laura Ingram to go speak on a campus. We arrive on Monday, we leave on Tuesday, but the professors are there every day. And every day our young people, at our expense, are being drilled into an ideology that convinces our sons and daughters to turn around and reject the values of their parents. The left controls that. That is their megaphone. And the point I'm trying to make is, how can we possibly expect to compete when the political issues that concern us are often decided at the cultural level before they even come to politics? The gay marriage debate was won in the culture before it ever came up before the court or before the Congress. The gay marriage debate was settled when Ellen came out of the closet, and there were countless reality shows and sitcoms, and everybody said, all those gay guys I see are super cool. And the cultural shift preceded the political shift, and by the time the political issue came up, it was a fait accompli, it was a done deal. So, what do we do? Seems to me that what we need to do is to recognize that we need to, first of all, expand the scope of our involvement. We simply can't concede these cultural institutions to the other side, or at some point even a political win will be rare, and when we get it, it won't matter. Now, the good news for us is that we are in an era of rapidly and massively changing technology, so we can do things that couldn't be done before, if only we'd be creative enough to do them. So let's take, for example, education. Is there a way to retake the university? No. There is no way to do that. But higher education is hugely expensive. It's essentially a dinosaur. It's producing kids who don't know anything and can't get jobs and have too many loans. And everyone's frustrated with the system. The higher education is pretty much in the same state that the rotary phone industry was 15 years ago. So we don't have to retake the rotary phone industry. We don't. There may be no way to do it, but we don't want to do it. What we actually have to figure out how to do is to build the academic iPhone. We have to figure out how to use modern technology, which is available now, to deliver education better, cheaper, more effectively. And the moment you do that, you have actually changed the whole game. The chemist Henry Bessemer invented a new way to make steel. And he conducted his experiment to see if this new method, the Bessemer method, would actually work. And the result came in and he saw it worked. And he writes in his diary, he says, at that moment I could see the huge iron industry of the world collapsing. And he goes, all its resources, all its power, all the hundreds of millions of dollars at its command, all of that amounted to nothing compared with the results of my simple experiment. In other words, here's a guy who figured out a better way to do it. And he recognized that the world, not that people would stop using the rotary phone, not right away, but there's something new in the world, and the world is going to move in that direction. This is the way that we need to think. It's a little outside the box. Let's talk about Hispanics for a moment. It's really important to win more. There's no reason the Republican Party should be losing 70% of the Hispanic vote, 70% of the Asian American vote. My God, Asian Americans are, as a group, free market oriented, meritocratic, and socially to the right of Pat Robertson. This is a group that should be voting 90% Republican and is in fact voting 70% Democrat. We're doing something terrible to lose those votes. Hispanics. I've been teaching Hispanics now English for 8 months. This is also part of my community service, which, by the way, I've actually got to continue doing for 5 years. But anyway, I teach these Hispanic students, about 100 of them. They're introductory, some of them are intermediate, some of them are advanced. And at the end of this, they've gotten to know me, they've gotten to know my story. And today, at the end of 8 months, if you were to conduct a vote, me versus Barack Obama, I would be very surprised if Obama got a single vote. And But this is not because I propagandize them. It's not because I'm like, R is for Republican. No. It was in fact only at the end of my 8-month tenure that a student said to me, can you actually explain to us the difference between the two parties, the two approaches to American politics? How would you convey it to us in a way that makes it really clear? And so what I said to him was, I said, look, American politics is divided between two groups of people, the liberals, the conservatives, and each of them has a very different view about how the guy on the bottom can come up to the top, or to the middle. How can someone rise in society? I said the two approaches can be summarized as the ladder or the rope. So let's start with the ladder. This is the conservative approach. Conservatives believe that America is a ladder of opportunity. Now the government does have a role. What's that role? That role is to hold the ladder. But it's your job to climb. And how far you get on the ladder is up to you. I said the advantage of this approach is that once you've gotten up the ladder, 2 rungs or 4 rungs or 8 rungs, it doesn't really matter, you're going to know that you did that. That success is going to be earned. You're going to feel the satisfaction of having done it. The disadvantage of the ladder approach is that you have to climb. And in fact, your fate, your destiny, is going to be largely, not entirely, but largely up to you. I said, but there's a totally different approach, and it's worth considering. The people who support this approach don't like the ladder. In fact, they'll do everything they can do to kick out the ladder. Their approach can be summarized as the rope. You've got a bunch of guys on top of a building, and they're telling you down there, watch for the rope. We're going to be letting down a rope. Your job is to hang on to the rope. We're going to pull you up. And I said to these students, I said, look, in a way that's a very tempting approach because it's kind of easier. You don't have to climb, you just got to hang on. And these guys will pull you up. I said, but there are two disadvantages that you should consider. Number one, you're at the mercy of the guys holding the rope. You're beholden to them. If they let go, down you go. Number two, even if you're able to move up, it won't be due to you. You can feel the gratification of the reward, but never the earned satisfaction of having done it, because you didn't. You didn't do it. Someone did it for you. And I said, basically, you, all of us who are starting life at the beginning, at the bottom, have to choose between the ladder or the rope. Now, the remarkable thing, I believe, is that this kind of framing of the question, this presentation of Republican principles, I believe, will sell the vast, vast majority of Hispanics. In other words, if I'm able to actually put that choice before people and have them vote on the ladder versus the rope, I have no doubt that the ladder will win, if not every time, the vast majority of the time. Why? Because this is the politics of opportunity that conservatism represents. Now, here we are in this room, 400 or so of us, and we're probably thinking, yeah, but we have an election coming up next year, and what can we really do? What can the Republican Party here do? We're in a red state, or conservatives in California tell me, we're in a blue state. California's going to go for the Democrats. Our votes are wasted. What can we do? The truth of it is, you can do a lot if you think and plan and strategize. So I've been in Dallas. Debbie and I are in Dallas. I've been in Dallas, and we're making a movie for next year, and it's going to be a secret history of progressivism and the Democratic Party and Hillary. And this is a movie I'm hoping to drop into the middle of the Democratic Convention. So in other words, to open it in a couple of thousand theaters the week of the Democratic Convention next summer. Now, here are 2 points that are worth considering. Number one, the fate of our movie is going to depend to a large degree on how we do in our 1,000 theaters the next weekend. If we do poorly, we'll go from 2,000 theaters to 1,200 theaters. So the point is, what can you do? One thing you can do is go see the movie in the theater opening weekend. That's using your leverage to help us get to more people. So people say, how do we reach independence? The way we reach independence is to be in 3,000 theaters and not 2,000 theaters. That way, every multiplex, every place where there's a bunch of theaters, our movie's playing. But if you say, well, I'd rather watch the movie at home, I'm going to wait for it to come out in DVD, good for you, but it doesn't have that multiplying effect. To have that, you must go opening weekend in the theater. Number two, the movie I'm making is funded by investors who have put money up for me to make the film. I can put the film in all the theaters in America, but what I can't do is put the film in the hands of the independent voters who will actually decide the next election. I cannot do that, but you can. Now, you say, well, the truth of it is the names and addresses of all the independent voters in Ohio, in Florida, in Colorado, in every swing state, those names and addresses are known. The Republican Party has them. Karl Rove has them. The Koch brothers have them. All kinds of people on our side have them. And so there's nothing to stop you as a club or as a team from saying, all right, we will take it upon ourselves to send 50,000 DVDs or 25,000 DVDs that are targeted to swing voters in these 10 counties, and we're going to do that as a project for this club. Why? This is a way of taking our dollars. Remember, these DVDs cost a few bucks a piece, but in a campaign that's going to cost several billion dollars, here is a way that tens of thousands of dollars can be concentrated laser-like on the very people who are going to decide the election. In my opinion, the messaging that we'll do in the movie will be eons ahead of what the Republican Party will do in terms of its official commercials. The reason is, we're fearless, we're going to take on issues that they'll never touch, and essentially taking on the left is not only my specialty, but it's become kind of my career goal. So we're going to do a very strong messaging on this. Activism, to be effective, needs to be targeted. Last year, my book America came out, and now this is a good example of how the left uses its power. Costco is one of the most beloved corporations in America. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. If someone had said that you can influence Costco, it would seem crazy. That's like trying to influence Coca-Cola. But the left knows it can influence Costco. Why? Because the CEO of Costco and some of the top guys in Costco are Democrats, and they gave money to Obama. So some Obama guys walk into Costco and they see a very unpleasant sight. They see in Costco copies of a book by one Dinesh D'Souza that celebrates America. And they're very upset to see this. They go, what the heck? Why are Obama's friends here in Costco exhibiting this book by this right-wing nut? And so somebody makes phone calls to Costco, and the Costco people are like, whoa. And they decide, they make an executive decision to pull all the copies of my book from every Costco in the country. Now, by the way, it's worth considering, this would never occur to us. We never think of going into Barnes & Noble and going, why is Jesse Jackson on the cover of this magazine? Let's boycott Barnes & Noble and let them know that they can't. We don't even think like this. But the way they think is, let's launch a strike on this guy and have Costco pull his books, and Costco does. They pull my book. Now, I'm a single author. My publisher doesn't dare take on Costco. So what happens? A journalist on an obscure website, WorldNet Daily, writes an article about this. And his readers are outraged. There are 1,000 people on WorldNet Daily saying, this is awful. Dinesh D'Souza the patriot. How can Costco pull his book? Blah, 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 blah. So this I would call an online mob. But it's an online mob in the wrong place. WorldNet Daily. Costco doesn't care what people are saying on WorldNet Daily. However, what happens over the next 24 hours is that this online mob begins to get smart. Somebody in the online mob says, why are we on the WorldNet Daily site? Let's go visit the Costco site. And over 48 hours, this snowball, which begins with 1,000 people, now becomes 17,000 people, and these 17,000 people carpet bomb, and it would not be an exaggeration to say destroy the Costco site. And what I mean by destroy is not that they do vandalism or call anybody names. They just go to every product on the Costco website, be it a pair of pants or a grill or a book or a bottle of wine. If you click on the bottle of wine to get customer reviews, you see ladies in Texas and Montana and California cutting up their Costco card, or making it in small pieces and mailing it to the CEO. Now, this is actually activism of, I should say, a superior stripe. It's absolutely devastating because Costco does half its business online, worldwide. And no corporation can actually operate with this kind of disaster on its website. It's allowing customer comments. It can't stop them. And the customer comments are telling you not to shop at Costco, because these people are terrible. And you have customers who obviously bought a card, cutting it up. So the CEO of Costco calls an emergency session, flies me to Seattle to meet him, and when I see him, I don't exaggerate when I say that the man is in tears. And the first line out of his mouth is, "Dinesh, you are destroying Costco." I am destroying a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And not only that, but he made it very clear to me that if I continue, he would be in very short order out of a job. He would be dismissed by the board of Costco. And so, anyway, the long and short of it is, we had a conversation, I returned to San Diego. By the time my plane lands, Costco has A, rescinded its decision, B, restored all my books to the shelves of every Costco, C, ordered 50,000 new books to go to Costco, D, when the movie comes out a week later, built special shelves, everybody else's DVDs on a shelf, special shelves. Now, so who did this? Actually, my involvement in this was close to zero. Who did this? Costco customers did it. What did they do? They actually applied their leverage directly and effectively in a way that was irresistible, impossible to fight. So, to me, this is the way to start thinking, right? The way to start thinking is creatively. You want to reach young people? Don't set up young people's liaisons in every state. What good is that going to do? Think about creating a comedy channel. The left has Colbert. They have Jon Stewart. They have Bill Maher. On our side, the three best people that we have are no one, no one, and no one. In other words, we have nothing to compete with those three guys at that level. At that level. So what I'm getting at is, we need to start thinking that way. The good news, all of you in this room have friends. If you're on social media, if you have 300 friends on Facebook, you are a multiplier. If you can take information and disseminate it, and you're not just disseminating it to 300 friends, remember, they have 300 friends apiece. So there's an incredible opportunity today, in a way that wasn't before, to do things that haven't been done. Look, Abraham Lincoln once said, America is ruled by public opinion. But he did not mean America's ruled by the opinions of the public. The ordinary guy doesn't care about politics. The ordinary guy votes every 2 years or 4 years if it isn't raining. But you care. We care. Lincoln's point is that there's a smaller subset of people who are actively involved in the process, and their impact is 50 or 100 times that of the ordinary guy, the ordinary apathetic guy. So forget about the swing voter. Don't waste your time worrying about people you don't even know. Focus on what you can do and how you can use your influence. And don't be intimidated by the other side. Years ago, a professor of mine told me the story about the lion tamer and the lion. So here's the lion tamer. Little guy with a stick. And there's the lion on a pedestal. And the lion tamer moves the stick, and the lion begins to do tricks in obedience with the instructions of the lion tamer. And the professor says to us, students, he goes, who is actually more powerful, the lion tamer or the lion? Well, it's obviously the lion. But now we have a puzzle. If the lion is more powerful, why is the lion so obediently and sycophantically following the lead of the lion tamer? And the answer is, the lion doesn't know its own power. The lion thinks that the lion tamer is more powerful. So here we are, the American people, we are very powerful. But we think, no, Obama's so powerful. He ignores laws. He does whatever he wants. The truth of it is, there's a lot that we can do to corral him if we were to think creatively and effectively. So I'm here to say that we have the right ideas, we have the resources, if we will only have the creativity and the will, we are going to be able to do something that this country desperately needs. America needs us. We have benefited a lot from being here in America. Only rarely in American history does the country actually need people. Normally it's kind of like if you're living in a house, you don't need to know the blueprints of the house, right? You walk in the hallways, you lie on the bed, no big deal. It's only when the house begins to shake that you say, oh, I better go get those blueprints from the attic. I better figure out how this house is put together. So we are in one such time. It's a critical time like the Revolution, the Civil War, World War II. The American dream itself is now a little fragile. It hangs in the balance. And I think it is up to us, our generation, to take the baton and recognize that we are in a position to save the country. Not the way we've been doing it so far. We actually haven't been doing a whole lot of saving of America, we have to admit. But there is a way to do it, and the opportunities are available to us if we will seize them. So I'm thrilled to be here. I want to say that this experience for me that I've been through has been educational. I've tried to take something that I didn't ask for, that in some ways has been extremely disheartening and unpleasant, a kind of dark night of the soul. At one point I stood in a courtroom and I would hear the bailiff bellow out, United States of America versus Dinesh D'Souza. Wow. As an immigrant, I don't even want to tell you how that makes me feel. But nevertheless, I realize that while there's a lot wrong with our government, there's not a whole lot wrong with our country. And we as Republicans are in a position, we're custodians now of America. I was talking to a group of South Asian students at Harvard, and one of them said to me, she was making the point I was making earlier about the tightrope and the two buildings, and she said, you know, Dinesh, how will I ever know that I have become an American? And I said to her, well, you'll know you've become an American when you become a Republican. The Republican Party is the defender of American core principles. We are all that America right now has got. And so we need to step up to the challenge. And that means doing more and giving more and being more involved and using your influence to the maximum to bring about the kind of change. The progressives are not stronger than us, they don't outnumber us, and they don't have resources that dwarf ours. We can compete effectively, but it's now up to us to rise up to the plate. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's your call. If we have time, I'll take a couple. Sure.